As I've mentioned before, microeconomics is called price theory at a lot of institutions, and we believe that economic agents respond very aggressively to the signals they get. And one of the most important signals that producers and consumers receive is conveyed by the price of different goods and services, especially relative to the cost of providing goods and services. If you're a producer, if you're a consumer, we pay a lot of attention, economists think, to prices of goods we like, especially if prices on one of the goods we like goes up and prices on other goods that we like don't. We would respond and to buy more of the relatively cheaper items and fewer of the former. That's the way we think it works, and we've observed the economy enough to know that we're onto something here. There's two broad functions that we think price plays. The first is called the rationing function of price, and this simply refers to the fact that if the price of onions, I had that cartoon with onions, apparently onions in India got expensive around the time this cartoon was drawn. About 99.9% of the cartoons, when I searched, Google searched price and cartoon, about 99.9% of them were about gas prices, but I like the onion price one better. Anyway, so one of the functions we think prices serve is the rationing function. And that simply states that if this market clears at a price P naught and a quantity Q naught, at price P naught, the price P naught serves as a rationing device. Those willing to pay P naught per bushel of onions or more get to have onions. But those who aren't willing, there's a lot of people that would buy onions if they were cheaper, but those not willing to pay at least P naught per bushel don't get onions. And so the price has served to allocate onions to one group and not to the other. And there are some problems with the way markets work. This isn't fair. Maybe the person that has a lot of money and is willing to pay a lot for onions is like the worst person in the world, and the person, Mother Teresa, doesn't have any money and can't afford to buy onions and can't afford to pay for anything, and she doesn't get onions that month, or didn't. She's dead now. But anyway, there's nothing fair about it. And for some goods, we're just fine letting prices ration that way. And a lot of goods in a market economy. If you can't afford a Lexus, fine, you don't get a Lexus. You can't afford a car at all, but take the bus, or walk, take your bike. But there's other goods that we say, hey, we're not going to let price ration those goods. And then we have a whole other set of problems, by the way. But so there's we have this moral code in Western society, maybe in other societies too, is that we don't want life or death determined by ability to pay or willingness to pay. If you're not able to pay, you don't, you can't be willing to pay something you don't have, right? So, we give in the United States food stamps to the very poor because food's necessary for life, and even if someone's really, out of a job, even if they're really lazy, we're just not comfortable saying, all right, you die. No, so we're going to give really poor people food stamps to get a basic level of living. Healthcare, right? We're okay allocating Lexuses and Mercedes and trips to Hawaii by price, but we're not willing to say, hey, you can't pay for care, you die. And so we have a lot of issues related to healthcare that stem from the fact that we're unwilling to let price ration services fully. Those are other topics that we'll get to later in the semester. So the other function of price that we're going to talk about, and the next screencasts are all about this allocative function of price. The allocative function of price refers to the phenomenon in the economy where resources flow out of one sector into other sectors over time, and resources go to areas where consumers value products highly in relation to the cost of producing those things, and they leave sectors where consumers are willing to pay relatively low amounts relative to the cost of producing things. So let's illustrate this with a little example, and we're going to, like the next, I don't know how many screencasts are on this topic. The rest of Chapter 7, essentially. All right, so let's just take an event. I don't know what happened in the onion market. I think probably it was some supply event, but just I think demand events are easier to get our minds around. So let's say whatever, onions, there's a new recipe out, onions cure cancer, or there's some reason onions get more popular. All right, so in the short run, demand goes up, and we know price will go up. And in the short run, there's just a certain amount of land planted in onions, and there's only so much fertilizer you can throw on to boost your yields. So the supply response might be quite muted in the short run. And so this is all that happens. Now, over the long run, and we've been dealing only with the short run so far, but over the long run, if this situation persists, let's say, onions and eggplants take very similar resources to produce. Well, this increase in price and demand that came about because of the demand for onions, well, that signals producers, hey, onions are making, farmers that are growing onions are the ones that have a new car this year or a new pickup truck this year. And the eggplant growers, yeah, they're doing okay, but they don't have the new car. It's the onions that are fetching a lot more than the cost of producing them. So over time, what's going to happen, producers are going to leave sectors like eggplant, say, that takes very similar resources, and move those resources into onions. That's the allocative function of price. I'm going to just draw that, use red for the long run. So this blue short run case, yeah, price goes up, quantity goes up. That happens in the short run. But over the long run, there's going to be an additional adjustment, and this is the allocative function of price at work. That price signal, and especially relative to cost, says, hey, farmers in the onion sector are making short-run profits. What that's going to mean is eggplant farmers and other farmers are going to say, hey, I'm stuck over here in eggplant. Next crop cycle, instead of planting eggplant, I'm going to plant onions. Well, two things happen. One, over time, we get an increase in the number of sellers of onions, and we know that that'll increase the supply of onions. So notice that resources have been drawn into the onion sector in the long run. And the way I've drawn it, we'll get some new equilibrium out here at Q2. And then over an eggplant, eggplant was going fine. Nothing really happened there, but because onions have become relatively more attractive to grow, some farmers don't plant eggplant and instead plant onions. So resources leave the eggplant sector because it's not as profitable as the onion sector. Not as profitable is another way of saying price is lower in eggplants relative to cost of production than it is over there in onions. So this is the allocative function of price, and it works over time to move resources where goods and services are valued highly relative to their cost of production, valued by consumers highly. And it moves resources out of areas where goods and services are valued relatively low, at a relatively low level by consumers relative to their cost of production. That's the allocative function of price.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.